The tech space is seeing a great revolution, with women rising fast in this space. Although it has historically been a male dominated field, the narrative is changing and more opportunities are being made available for women to excel and thrive in this space. In today's episode, we are honored to have Ebi-Yaa Kwaw, a trailblazing figure in the industry, as our guest. We unravel the fascinating chapters of Ebiyaa's journey, from overcoming challenges as a woman in tech to becoming a startup founder, failing and returning to the tech space as a UX UI designer, after what she calls a tech heartbreak. Enjoy today's episode.
This episode is brought to you by Big Spark. Big Spark is the UK's fastest growing data solutions consultancy, translating your business needs into data architecture, strategy, and engineering. Together with their technical partners, they focus on swift and efficient business value delivery. Taking an innovative approach to every challenge, Big Spark is an agile team of over 100 world-class engineers and data scientists pushing the boundaries of what can be achieved with AI, data, software, cloud, and machine learning. To find out how Big Spark can ignite your data solution, visit us at www.bigspark.dev. Big Spark, igniting change through engineering. Alrighty, hello everyone, and welcome to the TechSurf podcast, where we navigate today's tech wave one electrifying conversation at a time. I am your host Raymond Cluche, and today I have a long-time friend, sister, buddy. I worry her a lot on the daily, but today we have here on the TechSurf podcast Ebi-Yaa Kwaw. I hope I got the name right because I've never really mentioned your surname, but we have Abia here to, discuss her transition, or will I say, how she just entered tech and is now, doing amazing things in the tech space in so many areas, which we will delve into in further, or we'll delve into more as we go on in the conversation. So, welcome to the Tech Podcast, AB, and we're very grateful to have you here.
Thank you, Ray. I'm excited to be here as well.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so in the shortest amount of time, if you can, describe yourself, a bit of your background, say something short, and then we can get into today's episode or into the details of today's episode.
Okay, so I'm Ebi-Yaa Kwaw, like you rightfully introduced me. I'm a UX designer. I currently work with WeWire Africa, which is a fintech company that's into cross-border payments and transfers as well. I I enjoy working on fun products. I freelance as well in my free time. I do a bit of community service, and also I'm interested in people with special needs. So I volunteer with another organization. It's an NGO that focuses on people with special needs. Yeah, basically.
Right, right, right. So Abi and I were in. I think we're all in the same hostel, or I don't know. Depending on where depending on where you are in the world, you can call it an apartment or student apartment, whichever it is. But we were in the same hostel, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And we were friends. We happened to go to church together from time to time. And I never really bothered to know about what you did in school. All I just knew was you were a fun person. And every time my personality was showing up at the bus stop, you always engaged me. Then one day I get to know that you are in tech and doing techie stuff, and now you are doing very great techie stuff. Like, I was so confused. And clearly you didn't study. I mean, you did information studies, and information studies wasn't as very intensive as computer science or computer engineering or IT, and with psychology for that matter. I'm just curious, like, what led you to first go and read psychology and information studies, and how did that have a huge impact in you, like joining tech or becoming a techie in the long run?
what actually led me into reading psychology and information studies? So, if you're Ghanaian and you went through the educational system, you'd realize that getting into the university wasn't really about what you wanted to read, especially for most people in the social sciences. Um, it was just what the university gave you. I didn't have a choice. That's if your grades don't match up to what you want to read. So yeah, I think I fell within those categories, and I basically just went with what I was given. That's how come I read psychology and information studies. But I think along the lines, I fell in love with some of the courses in psychology, but then I really liked information studies because I would say that I wasn't tech inclined, but I had, I liked it. I liked the way, the things were going, how certain things were being done, and what I was being taught. I think those were the parts that I enjoyed about school.
So you read information studies, and you probably were introduced to a lot of concept and tech and everything, programming and all that. Would you say you just went straight into UI UX, or you did a bit of hardcore programming and code before it led you into what you are doing currently?
Okay, so for what I read in information studies, we were not introduced to programming. Um, it wasn't it wasn't an actual like technical, program. What you find in information studies will be, things about library, books, the library systems, and probably teaching you parts of a computer, which I felt at that stage was like way below us. But then yeah, we're still taught those things. And I think one of the things that I've used or I still use is system design. That's mostly the main thing that I can connect to what I'm doing now. But aside that, how I went into programming, it wasn't even through that route. So right after school, we have something we call the national service, where you're mandated to do a 1 year service period in an institution you're posted to. It could be government or private. So I went into banking for that 1 year. And after banking, um, I didn't really feel a connection there. Let's just say I was just wild. I wanted to be out there and see what could happen for me. So I opted out, and I decided to explore. And then I came across a friend, an old roommate of mine, who introduced me to a Figma boot camp. So that's the genesis of everything. So that's where my interest in design stemmed from. But even though I started from design, I didn't go into design. I rewinded. I rerouted to engineering software. So I did a bit of front end, and then finally came back to design. But we'll talk about that more as we go ahead.
Yeah. One will say that, software engineering is like a hot career. Every company or every industry needs a software
Yeah.
engineer. And we are always, sitting in front of some software of a sort and always interacting with UI elements, right? That could have been a good, chance for you to build your career and become a top-notch front-end developer. But then you chose to go on the other side of, the design space, which is more UX, UI. What, yeah, why did you just happen to just maybe abandon in quotes the core engineering bit of design and went for a rather
You know,
different, exactly, a more a softer,
right?
yeah,
I get it, but something about this story is deeply rooted in my heart. And if I'm to explain how I ended back in design, it's going to be like a very long route, but I'll give you like a summary. So
right.
I started the Figma Bootcamp, which was about 4 weeks. So we had
Mm,
one session every week, which was very interesting. So I said to myself, okay, if I'm designing mobile apps and websites, how would it feel to actually build them out and then bring them to life? Because if you're a designer and you're a beginner, one challenge you're going to face is most of your designs will not end up in production, right?
mm,
So especially if you're just doing like dummy projects and you're not on projects where they're actually dedicated engineers to build these things out. So
mm,
I was like, okay, I want to learn programming. I want to learn engineering. so that I can learn how to build these things. I had an opportunity to mentor a group of girls the following year in a mobile app development, which I hadn't started learning, but then I had to mentor
Mm.
them. The plan was I was actually just to be like a chaperone and then help them with some of their questions. But then at the end of the day, the tutor didn't show up and then we're supposed to step up into that position. So now I had to go learn how to build Android apps and then teach these girls for a challenge called Technovation Challenge.
Mm.
So we went through that process, we taught them, and I got the opportunity to take part in another boot camp by the Ghana Tech Lab. Yeah,
Mm.
and that was a mobile app development program. So I went to
Right.
that program. I learned how to build in JavaScript, React Native, and yeah, I think that was my journey into front end.
Mm.
How I ended back in design. So after Ghana Tech Lab, after the program, we went through this whole series of this startup journey and
Mm.
actually co-founded a fintech startup with another lady called Elom.
Mm.
And
Yeah, in fact, you went ahead of us, but stay there because I was gonna that was gonna be my next question. But you go for it.
yeah,
I'm glad you went there.
okay, I won't go into details so that I can ask that
Oh
question.
no, go for it. Go for it.
Okay, cool. So I co-founded this startup with Elom, and we were actually we wanted to build a credit scoring model, right?
Mm.
And the whole idea was a credit scoring model. But then we sat back and realized, okay, we didn't have what we needed to build a credit scoring model. Where are the where's the infrastructure? We needed to identify certain stakeholders that we needed to work with so they can provide us with the data that we are looking for to score each individual loan. And it was a very long road. At the end of the day, we had to pivot, start from somewhere. So we decided to go into income and expense management, and then use incoming data from people's accounts to be able to track whatever they're spending, their
Mm.
behavioral patterns, and then score them on it. And I think those phases required a lot more preparation than we thought we had. Because usually in these startup programs, they introduce you to it and then next thing you're flying.
Mm.
But then I think that the preparation phase, even emotionally, mentally, physically, to make you understand that this is what you're going in for and it's going to be a long road, wasn't there. So in our minds, we felt really beaten emotionally because we had invested most parts of our lives.
Mm.
Almost 2 years into building this, we actually released a first version. We had more than 100 people tested, but we eventually had to close it down because we couldn't get that far.
Mm.
So, with my broken heart, I decided to find something else to do. Initially, I said, this tech thing, I'm over it. So I went
Mm.
into marketing. You know, I went into marketing for a year. But then during that year, I told myself, I really want to get back to design because the feeling that I had when I was starting off in Figma Bootcamp versus the feeling that I had when I was building my startup, there were two different things. And if anyone can attest, I mean, during the boot camps, I was better at designing than development. So I was like, okay,
Mm.
why don't I grow this? So I dedicated that year to building my portfolio. I worked on freelance design gigs while I was working as full time as a marketing, executive. So during the day, I'm in marketing. At night, I'm in design.
Mm.
So um, thankfully, exactly after a year, I had the opportunity to interview with an agency. And yeah, that's how I got my design role.
Interesting. So, how would you say that your experience with, having to close your startup down had a major impact on your view of tech and the ecosystem or tech in general?
Mm,
Yeah.
right. That had It had a huge impact on me
Mm,
as a person because it leaves you feeling a lot of things. You start to feel down, like a failure, and you literally have to re-strategize and like make up your mind that
mm,
there are other things for me to do. You know, the fact that the startup failed doesn't mean that I have failed as a person. In the beginning, it was hard to separate those two. But then as I went on, I realized that if I want to do this, I have to detach myself from that phase and then be able to move on. And apparently when after I was able to do that, you know, I meet people and then they go like, "Oh, we really admired what you were doing." And then this was me back then feeling like, "Oh, I can't do this. I'm a failure. And I wasn't doing this right." And then, you know,
mm,
what would people think about me? I go out there, "Oh,
mm,
she's the one that started the startup and
mm,
everything. She couldn't pull through." But it was really the opposite. And people tend to admire females doing that. I think in Ghana, we didn't have, I'm not sure now, but at the time, Elom and I were sort of like the first founders that brought up, okay, income and expense tracking, you know,
mm,
natively. But
mm,
there were other apps in the system, you know, but they're not like Ghanaian founded.
mm,
So I think that was just something that I held on to and decided to grow with it.
mm. Honestly, you said people were inspired. I am one of those people. I was, because anyone who knows me knows that my tech journey has been a very rigorous one.
Mhm.
One will one will assume that I have a podcast right now,
Yeah.
and meaning that, oh, I've always been a techie. But no, if you listen to the intro and the trailer, you will hear like bits and pieces that I struggled during my bachelor's. I didn't even do well as much as I wanted to. It was in my master's that I would say I really had a very, techie experience. And that was also very challenging. So seeing how you were very keen on it, you used to even reach out to me, message me, because when I was in front, I remember all those as I was like, wow, you're really, really keen on getting this over the board. And it's always sad, when you start something that has, very good prospects, that unfortunately becomes um, a historical event in your life that you can only talk about and nothing to show for. But that is fine, because I think after everything, you've been able to still, pick yourself up and been able to build yourself into the space that you are in now. And I have seen you now, you are speaking at conferences, you are, doing workshops and everything. So it has worked out in the long run. So I don't necessarily think it is bad. Okay, now let's delve a little bit into UX, right? You now the first time I had an idea of what UX could possibly be was in a class where they were talking about HCI, so human computer interaction, where they were talking about the typical elements of how we interact with things, blah blah blah, colors, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
It didn't really intrigue me, I'll lie. But I saw a bit of, the psychological part of things,
Right.
and how that will play a huge role in one's decision making in terms of what a button should look like, how a button should feel, all that kind of stuff. Would you say your background in psychology had a huge impact in you becoming a UI UX designer? If yes, how or what, can you give me one major scenario where you had to apply your psychology?
Okay. So, um, did it have a huge impact? I wouldn't say that it actually influenced me into doing
Mm,
UX. But then once I was in UI UX, I could connect some things, you know, from psychology
mm,
into that industry.
mm,
Um, these days, what I do at WeWare, I find myself, you know, asking questions, especially when it comes to refining flows where users go through to achieve certain tasks.
all right.
So you find yourself asking certain questions. Where did they drop off? You know, why did they drop off? What is causing this? And you have different users coming to a product to achieve
Mm,
different things,
mm,
but we realize that the product's also solving one problem, and you have to make room to be able to accommodate all of these types of users coming from different backgrounds. Right?
Mm,
So people will fuss about color, saying that this color could affect how this person thinks because
mm,
oh someone has some superstitious belief about red or blue or
mm,
green or yellow,
mm,
but that's like actual deep core UX. And looking at some of the things, you find that okay, we are making decisions based on how users interact with this page. What are you know the touch points that they're clicking, um where do they spend more time, what is causing them to delay at this point, right? Someone might be, might perceive red differently, might perceive blue or green or gray differently. But looking at certain principles of psychology, you can attribute those things. You can make actual connections to principles in design, such that we would say in gestalt psychology, you view things as a whole, right?
mm.
So independent things coming together to be one thing. And then in design, we have different things on a page, but then they all should come into unison.
Right.
And then we have this thing about hierarchy, where you should see the biggest, the boldest, and then in descending order, right?
Mm, mm,
And your main call to action, which could be a button, right? So
mm,
call to actions are things that lead you to decision making points.
mm,
So
mm,
your main call to action should be actually very visible for the user to identify, so that they
mm,
don't spend too much time going around finding what they
mm,
want to achieve. So
mm,
these are just like the few things that I can connect to psychology. But to
mm.
say that it motivated me to go into UX, no.
Okay.
Um, I just happened to read that and then happened to
Mm,
be in UX. So
mm.
let's just say that's an advantage that I have.
A powerful one for that matter, I would say. Now, you did mention earlier when it come, or you when you were talking about being a co-founder. You said there wasn't a lot of representation in the tech space, and for that matter, women young as you are trying to create such a robust app, such a robust app, right?
Mm-hmm.
um I believe for some time now the scene is changing. I think there are a lot more women that are speaking up about what they're doing in the tech space and everything, because PwC published a report where the percentage of women who are in tech
Yes.
and those that even stay in tech, the churn is very very high. You get it. How would you say your journey as a woman in tech has been? Do you feel that the people you've had around you or the men you've had around you have been very helpful? If you want to give a particular person a shout out for really being a great mentor, holding your hand to get you where you are, or if it could be a man or a woman, but anyone who helped create space for you to flourish, make your necessary mistakes where you had to, correct you where they had to, and
Mm-hmm.
help you build the career that you have now.
Right. So throughout my journey, I wouldn't say that I've experienced, that kind of bias, but well, I think that it could also be from the period that I started learning how to design and then started learning software engineering. It could also be from that period because um I've heard stories about, people being looked down on,
Mm,
women not being given equal opportunity. But for the programs that I was in, women were actually encouraged. I think those were
mm,
the few programs that were encouraging girls and women to take up such roles. Um, I think the only time that I would say that this happened was maybe this was just in our minds, but then a short story going back to our startup days. So we needed APIs, right, to be able to get some of the data that we needed for the credit scoring model.
mm,
And we went to this giant telecommunications company. I don't want to mention the name, but if you know
Mm,
Giants, you should know. Um, yeah, we needed some APIs. We had done our research. Um, we knew what we wanted. We
mm,
knew competitors that were already using their APIs, right? Which at the time may have been customized for those competitors,
mm,
right? When I say competitors, I mean our competitors, not their competitors. So that we're actually partnering with these people to provide certain services for their customers.
mm.
And we went through the process, we met some of their reps, and all they could tell us was, no, this is not available for you to use. And we're very we went as far as the Bank of Ghana, right? We went as far as the
Mm,
central bank, and we wanted to get into Gibbs to be able to find out what was
mm,
happening. That was at 2019, 2020. So as at 2019, Gibbs was fairly new, and Gibbs is an interbank payment platform,
right.
sort of, that was set up by the central bank. So it
Mm,
just aids interoperability between networks and banks and everything. So we wanted that API, so we went to Gibbs. We didn't get good feedback, and at the end of the day, Elon and I just said to ourselves that, it's probably because we are two young girls.
oh.
We're two young girls, and they don't think that, oh, we are serious about what we are saying. But then we have prototypes to show them. We can show them this, we can show them that. At the end of the day, if a partner comes in, I would say that if we had funding, right? If we had
Like VC on board.
Yeah, if we had some sort of backing, it
Mm.
would have been different, right?
And not necessarily backing whether it be male dominated or female, but once there was a more structured institution around what
Yes,
you guys were doing,
yes,
it could
definitely,
have.
definitely. And we even had to rope in the Ghana Tech Lab on this, where we actually
Mm,
started from. So,
mm,
can you people help us get into this place? They could only provide us with a letter, and it
oh.
was really sad. But yeah, I think that was the only part that we experienced, you know. But I would say that looking back now, I think I met someone recently, an old friend, who actually works with that institution now,
Mm,
and he mentioned that they were actually developing those APIs. Even though
mm,
there were transaction APIs that we could work with, they
mm,
hadn't, structured it in a way which they could serve to, other startups and things. And for that partner they were working with, it was on a strict basis. And they were also like an established company. So there were ways to go around, how to serve customers and things like that. And they were not using the APIs for, third party purposes. It was going back into the customers for that same company. Um, yeah, people that held our hands during those times. So I remember we had in those spaces, right? I think that when you get into those spaces, it's really good because it introduces you to a network of mentors, right?
mm,
So depending on what you're working on, depending on what you're building, you identify which mentor um, would sort of help you to grow in that light. And through interactions, through networking, you get to identify some of these people, especially with the passion that they have or their business lines, right? So we met Mr. Amo, I would mention his name, of
mm,
InnoHub. He's actually the founder of InnoHub. And he held our hands through those stages. He introduced us again to Solomon Chu. He's also a director at Reach for Change. He took us through some building blocks in our startups. They ran us through, how to run a business, different things that we really didn't know. I thought I knew certain things about finance because I worked in a bank, but no, they were totally different. Even how to set up a business plan, the lean startup model, all of those things. They really helped us. And I think that coming into design, I had one mentor who also helped me a lot. I had two, right? So from my Figma bootcamp, I had James Bador, who's currently the co-founder of ADP List, and also Joseph Joseph Kipo. He currently works with M Pharma as a designer as
Mm,
well.
mm,
So those people, I really, really can't take them out of my journey. They've helped me a lot, and at every stage in time, I always remember them. Sometimes I reach back, just to get some details on how I can improve myself. How am I doing in this field? Where
mm,
do I go from here? Just certain pointers, because most of the time, when someone has gone ahead of you, um, in a phase or like in a business line, you
mm,
they make certain mistakes where you can learn from, so that you don't get to repeat those things in your journey.
mm. That's good. That's good. I had an episode with a friend of mine, Kwame, and he made me realize that naturally I'm one who just likes to do a lot of mentoring, like to pour into people
Right.
and all that I've learned,
Yeah, I see
and
that.
because yeah, quite obvious. And I am a product of people holding my hands to get to where I was. I remember the first mobile app project I worked on. Boy, it was terrible. It was an Android app, and for those of you, and for those who know Android development, there is something called an activity and there's something called a fragment,
Mm.
right? And there are times where an activity is more sensible to use in that particular, user journey. If I could use a bit of UX, UI, is that a right term?
Sure.
Is
Well,
that a
I
right
can't
term to
really say
use?
for what you're explaining because I don't know what
Yeah, but
you're
okay,
talking
but
about.
I'm talking about like the flow of the user
Oh,
using the app.
yeah.
What is the like? What's the right term I will use there?
A user journey or an
Okay,
outcome.
good. All right. So I was there. Not too bad. Maybe I should explore a career in UX after all.
Yes.
But yeah, and a time where a fragment will make more sense,
Okay.
because an activity may be relatively heavy and that could distort the entire flow. It's a lot of things, and at times where my sister saw me really burn the midnight candle trying to work on that app, and it didn't unfortunately the app did not come to fruition. It
No.
was a very sad situation. We're trying to build an Uber like service for a particular client who had a particular niche of people in a different country, and the idea was good, and it was that was where I got to learn a lot of things,
Mhm.
Firebase. I mean, the guys, every time I'm on the podcast, um Thomas, Saeed, and Fitzgerald, those guys were very helpful. They allowed me to make very foolish mistakes. They allowed me to write unnecessary follows. They
Right.
used to tell me that I seem to like spaghetti because my code is always spaghetti
Pretty
code.
good, yes.
Exactly. And like they really helped me understand how to think properly on a lot of things, and I'm still growing in that area. So when I see people also taking up mentorship at the same time, me like for myself as an example, I'm very happy, because there's someone out there who wants to be inspired by your journey. I've had people who shot their shot at me
Mm.
on LinkedIn. I currently mentor four boys or four young men, because they are not boys any longer, actively. And one is not even a techie. One is from economics background, but there's enough in me to help him make better decisions and everything. So
Right.
yeah, I do agree that it's very essential for us to help people and help them also make their own mistakes, but then guide them in making those mistakes. I'm very strong not to also be too corrective of the mistakes I made in my life, that I don't allow people to also grow by making their mistakes. But then I'll let them minimize. You make one fall, that okay, the next fall you're going to do is going to break your leg.
Yeah.
So let's maybe put some cushion there. Let's rather re-strategize. You get it? Now let's get away from typical heavy tech conversations and all that. What does your everyday look like? I'm sure people will see you, people will see you as a boss lady on Instagram or the LinkedIn, and it's like they see you doing the stuff they admire and all, and it looks good, it looks fancy. Social media is beautiful, but then there are other parts that people will not really see.
Mm-hmm.
What does your everyday look like, and how do you, try to take, a breather, relax, and wind down?
Right. So, like you're saying, people will see you on social media being, oh, that's a UX designer. She works at WeWork Africa and all of that. But in my mind, inside me, everything is going helter skelter.
Mm,
I've tried to figure out what's the next thing I need to do. I have to check off these tasks on ClickUp. I have to, let these things go on Jira. I have to update the components. I have to do this. I have to do this. But making sense out of it all, right? Sometimes I just need to slow down
mm,
and then think. you know, it's one thing I learned from a friend was that you always make a plan.
mm,
So one thing I do these days, I make a plan. I write down the things I need to do, which includes work and out of work. So
mm,
even for things I do at home, things I do outside the house, things I do at work, I make a plan for everything. And I get to go throughout the day checking off these tasks, right? But then in the work environment, what I do as a UX designer, uh, I first of all, I would like to say that it's really fun working at WeWork.
oh,
I like the culture, and yeah, because I came from an agency,
mm,
and if you've been in an agency before as a designer or like a developer, you know how fast paced it
mm,
is, which makes me appreciate that environment. But then you also get to see how relaxed product companies are.
mm,
And so for a day-to-day activity for UX designer, once you get to work, so I do a hybrid system, both in office and in remote. So once the day starts, we usually have this thing we do where you list out everything you need to do for the day, what you did yesterday, what you're doing
mm,
today, or if it's weekly, what you did the previous week, what you're doing this
mm,
week, right? So that there's some sort of accountability for everyone. What we do is because we're a small team, we check up on each other. We make sure that okay, my tasks are not blockers for you,
mm,
and I get to check off things in time so that you can also get to move at your own pace, right? So basically, that's how my day looks like. So if I'm not designing, I'm looking into how to improve our components. I'm working on mobile responsiveness and on all that sort. And also, we have people that want to enter into the design
mm,
space right in the office. So in our team, there's one person that wants to, go on that design
mm,
tangent. So we do a bit of mentoring there. We'll have UX design live sessions with other people as well. We have two people actually joining in who are outside we were. So they join in, we have design sessions. Sometimes we just have reviews. Sometimes we talk about tasks and how to go about certain
mm,
things. Other days too, we just do clones of very good websites, and then go through how they actually represented certain things, design processes, and then things like
mm.
that. Yeah, basically, so that's how my day is like. Aside those things, I freelance as well, so extra time you definitely find me trying to get some extra cash.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. You did mention that you are interested in, kids with special needs and everything, and I found that very
Mhm.
intriguing. I want us to just talk a little bit about that. What led you into that, and what do you do in that organization?
Okay, so that's way outside
Mm-hmm.
design and then tech, but it's the name is a Beautiful Life
Okay.
Foundation. So how it started is it's actually my sister's
Mm,
foundation, and she has a kid with cerebral
mm,
palsy, right? So you know that whole thing about She's fortunate enough to have been in school for a period, and it had to be a special school. But then meeting all of these children and looking at how their lives are totally affected by the conditions, she thought it wise to offer some kind of support to not the actual, people with disabilities, but then the families as
All right.
well. So most of the time, we have organizations coming in. Okay, I want to help with this person's fees. Okay, I want to get a wheelchair for this disabled child. But then, what the family actually goes through to be able to support this person, you have no idea. Because if you have such a child or such a person in your family, there's always supposed to be one person dedicated to taking care of them, right? So if you do not have the funds to hire a nurse or a day nanny or something like that, you have to basically restructure your life to be able to fit them into
All
your
right.
schedule. So our foundation is focused on offering solutions or help in any way
Mm,
possible to families of people with special needs. Now, special needs can range from cerebral palsy, autism, Down syndrome, any kind of developmental, conditions in children, not only children but in adults as well. Yeah, we have respite programs. We train people in entrepreneurial skills. Most of these providers or caretakers have to abandon their careers, have to abandon their jobs to be able to stay home to take care of these people, and then feeding at the end of the day becomes very difficult in a part of the world. People are not really educated on these conditions, right? We have a lot of religious beliefs, superstitions concerning people with special needs and people with disabilities. So you find that a lot of these people taking care of the kids are usually the mothers. And these mothers are basically abandoned by everybody. For a few of them, you find supportive families, coming in to help where necessary. But most of them, you realize that they have no one at all. So we also have certain partners that are on board that offer monthly
mm,
stipends to these families just to help them get by. And our plan is also to train them in certain skills that they can actually make a living out of, even from their
mm,
homes, right? So that's what we've been doing
mm,
since 2020. We actually founded in
mm,
2019, but then that's what we've been doing since
mm.
2020. And yeah,
That's amazing.
so far so good.
Now, just my last but one question: would you ever go back into entrepreneurship or founding a startup or something of a sort?
Definitely, definitely. But one thing I will not do is go back into fintech. No way. No way. Because
You never
I
say never.
think
You
that
never know. Maybe this time you get to.
no, you know what? Regulatory bodies, right,
Mm,
drained the life out of me. They took away everything. It's not as if they closed us down or
mm,
something, but you realize that the barriers to entry for
mm,
every fintech is really high. Is really, really high. And if you don't have proper structures and you're just starting off like the way Elon and I
mm,
did, oh, you're sure to go down very soon because without structures in place, the right funding, good mentorship, you know, a good plan, a roadmap, I don't think you'll be able to survive.
mm,
But I think that how regulations and regulatory bodies have evolved is actually good because these days the central banks have something they call the fintech
mm,
sandbox, where fintechs can tap into to access APIs. During our time, there was nothing
mm,
like that. There was actually a year or two after we quit. That was when we had the fintech sandbox come into place. But yeah, one thing I will never do is go back into fintech. I have other ideas in tech as well, but then it will take a little bit of courage to go back into that.
That's good. That's good. Lastly, someone like I said, um, a lot of people look at social media and just see the glitz part of it. And today we've spoken about so many things, the details of your life and all that. What advice would you give to someone specifically for a lady based on the title of the the episode? What advice would you give to a lady who is either starting or currently in the space and is
Mhm.
having some very interesting seasons, or is thinking about even leaving in the long run? Maybe try and give an advice for each
Yeah.
of these categories. Yeah.
Mm. So first thing, I saw a post on social media recently saying that tech is overrated, but I don't think
Mm,
so. Anyway, regardless, I think that tech can be very
mm,
overwhelming. You know, um, I think that our learning styles and our teaching styles
mm,
have not allowed us to go so deep when it comes to learning on your own and try to discover things you can do by yourself, right? We mostly rely on what we are taught,
mm,
spoon feeding and things like that. So when you get into an environment where you have to do a lot of digging by yourself, you have to learn continuously, it can be very overwhelming. And there are so many trends coming up. There are so many roles. First of all, if you even want to transition like I
mm,
did, how do you identify, okay, what do I want to do? Where do my interests lie? What can be, what are the low hanging fruits that I can achieve
right,
and then move on to the
right,
next. So, um, as overwhelming as it can
mm,
be, you just need to take your time, right? If you're venturing into tech, um, first of all, identify where your interests
mm,
lie. Once you do this, you can also find people in those spaces that you can reach out for mentorship.
mm,
And reaching out doesn't really have to mean that you know the person.
mm,
Some people actually dedicate their extra time to mentor
mm,
people. So once you reach out to them, you're sure that this person will be able to help you out, right? And then you would have to learn continuously because even as I sit here now, I feel like I'm so far
right,
behind. Because there are so many new things in
yeah,
design that I need to
right,
learn that I feel like, oh, I need to catch up with these things, right? So even though you may be in it, but then you have to learn continuously. And then while you do that, you have to let people see that okay, you are hungry for this
mm,
knowledge, go to extra lengths to achieve what you want to achieve, right? And I think the last thing would be you have to be
mm,
committed and be
mm,
consistent. Okay. You can learn a ton of things today, and then tomorrow there'll be a new ton of things released, right? Not to say that you're chasing after new
mm,
trends, but then keeping yourself abreast and then always making sure that you stay afloat. You need to be committed in terms of time. If you are having to learn a new skill, it doesn't matter how many things you do in a day, but how often you keep at
mm,
it, right? Will bring out, that understanding or that level that you want to reach. Those four things, being committed, learning continuously, finding mentorship, right? And then identifying your interest. I think that's what I'd say to those looking to enter
mm.
into tech. Yeah.
Well, Ebiyaa, you do hear me say this a lot of the time, but I'm going to say it again. I am super proud of
Thank
you, and I'm sure you know
thank
why.
you.
And no one needs to know because it's our own details. But I have seen you, jump a lot of hurdles, and you just keep moving forward, and you have this very positive mindset. You acknowledge, the challenges that a lot of these events have, had or played a role in your life, but the you are very much my mantra, stay resilient and go for gold. When I chose that mantra, I didn't know that when you choose a mantra like that, God will choose to give you things that will cause you to stay resilient and go for good.
Well,
But yes, and I'm excited about the next phase of your career. I think you have a budding career ahead of you. You're already doing the great stuff. You're speaking at engagement. I see you on the panel with like huge people in the industry, and they say, like show me your friend, and I'll show you who you are. So you
right.
are sum total of the people you surround yourself with. So kudos to how far you've come, and don't stay there. There's so much ahead of us. There's so much potential in us that we can explore. So just keep pushing. And you know me, I'm your cheerleader for life. I'll be cheering you on,
Always, always.
and seeing you rise to the top. So thanks so much for making time.
Thank you too. It was amazing being here.
My pleasure.
Indeed, adventures can be exciting but also heartbreaking. From Ebiyaa's journey as a woman in tech, having occupied roles in marketing, UI UX design, and co-founding her startup Spendly, she reminds us that regardless of your gender, there is enough opportunity for you to excel if you can only be just a little bit resilient and push yourself towards your goals. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Tech Podcast. See you in the next episode.